Welcome to Saucer Squad, the podcast about staying sober in the city, with your hosts, Kate Zander and Jess Valentine.
Hi, Squad. It's me, Kate, solo, Squad 2.0, and I'm here with Tawny. Hi, Tawny.
Hello, my love.
Welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Always great to be here.
Oh my God, what's new? Tell me everything. I don't remember the last time you were on, but I feel like it was a while ago. What's been going on since? You've been busy.
So my partner and I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment in Manhattan.
Oh my God,
so
you're living in a mansion.
I essentially, a unicorn rent stabilized 3-bedroom popped up in our building.
Oh my God,
building.
wow.
It was literally the easiest move ever.
Good for you.
And so I have my own office. I'm recording in my own,
I think last time you were in your bedroom. Yeah, this is different.
Yeah, exactly. So that has been incredible for my mental health, for my sanity, for our relationship. He has an office. I have an office. Our bedroom is just a bedroom. Mm-hmm. That's a brand new concept for me.
Yeah.
And I've created a meditation closet in my office.
Oh my God.
Where
good for you.
It is a space where like I meditate, I do tarot, I read, like it's my space to just chill and reconnect. And that is such a gift that I gave myself.
I love that. That's good. I like good news coming out of the pandemic because I think it's a relatively dark time right now for many of us where we're like, what are we doing? Where are we going? What happened? Why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
Seems to be the consensus.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's a lot of good stuff. And, my book comes out in September.
How do you feel?
So I am so excited. It's like, it's so weird because I've worked on this, I've been working on this book for literal years, and it's just so crazy to see how it's, it started as a memoir, and then I workshopped it for years and realized I don't want to write a memoir, but I'm still interested in the conversation. So it's about sober sex and dating and relationships. So, it was a memoir about my experience, sober sex and dating. And then once I pulled myself out of the story and wrote about it from a journalistic perspective, there's a lot of my own story is in there, but the book is more based on journalistic research, interviews, statistics, things like that.
Wait, tell me more about that, because this sounds too smart for me. So you were writing it from a memoir perspective. So you were telling your stories. And then what? No, you got no bites?
So I workshopped it. Like I took memoir writing workshops for years, and, I would print out pages and bring it into class and read it out loud. And that is, if anyone listening is a writer, like, that is like, writing is one thing, but reading it out loud is like a whole other thing, a whole other level of vulnerability. So I realized, like, I felt uncomfortable reading it out loud. I was like, wait, I don't want to share a lot of this stuff. And
interesting.
The whole point of workshopping is to get constructive criticism from other people in the class. And people had questions, they had concerns, they had thoughts, they had feedback, they had all of these ideas.
Wait, hold on, pause. What is the feedback? What are the rules of feedback in a circle like that? Because I feel like that's all I've ever wanted. But then there's also the aspect of like, do you really want that? Like on some level, right?
I mean, so in a traditional, my experience with a traditional memoir writing workshop, everyone is like, we were sitting in couches and chairs reading our pages. And then people either were reading along with me on their laptops or printed my pages out. Like we all did this for each other. So maybe they would write, circle or underline passages like, this is great, or, expand this scene.
Got it.
Or move this here.
Okay.
Or we need to know more about this.
So it wasn't like judgment on the content. It was like constructive.
It's always constructive.
Sure.
I mean, exactly. It's always constructive. And like, there's no point in saying this is bad. Like, why is it bad?
Right.
What do you not like, and how could it be better?
Yeah.
And I found myself feeling quite defensive in those workshops, defensive and vulnerable, And that showed me that I don't want to answer some of these questions. I don't want to share this part of my story, but I do think the conversation of sober sex and dating and how alcohol is so normalized with dates and sex that I still wanted to talk about that.
Yeah.
So after a lot of tears and hundreds of pages, I pulled myself out of the story and I interviewed other people, I interviewed you. I interviewed, mental health professionals, regular sober people. I interviewed sex therapists. I interviewed like biochemists about what alcohol does to our bodies, and how that shows up sexually. I really nerded out, Kate. I really nerded out. So
that's big of you though, to like take that step back and evaluate, like, because I feel like for those of you that haven't listened to any of my podcasts with Tawny before, she has her own podcast and she's been in the sober space for a while now. We're like, maybe dinosaurs? Are we old women in the sober space, I guess?
We're like the boomers of millennial podcasts, sober podcasts.
I guess, yeah. And we've both been pretty unfiltered. Like, you've been very unfiltered in your experiences and sharing your story. So for you to kind of have that, wait a minute, I think that's interesting. Like, it shows that, there was stuff left to say, but you do want to still keep some things for yourself. Sometimes I feel like I've said all the scary things. I'm like, oh, that's out there.
And maybe you have,
right.
But like, it's,
but like, I have second thoughts about it sometimes where I'm like, should I have really given it all away?
I get it.
Yeah.
Trust me, I get it. And there are some conversations that I just want to have with my therapist and my partner,
right,
and people that I care about and I trust.
Yeah.
Or with myself, like, I'm still really glad I wrote all of that.
Yeah.
I'm glad I wrote that memoir because it helped me process quite a bit. So the book that I wrote that comes out in September is the journalistic exploration of the role alcohol plays in sex, dating, and relationships, and how to do sex, how to do sex and dating and relationships without alcohol. So there is that journalistic nerdy research, but there's also conversation starters. There's sober date ideas. I have a whole chapter about herbal aphrodisiacs, and and I got really into talking about the pandemic. I got really into herbal medicine during the pandemic and learning about herbal aphrodisiacs. So and it's called Dry Humping. So
still a catchy name though. You didn't lose the catchy title. Good. I'm glad.
No, and you can pre-order it now. Please pre-order it.
Yeah. So when in September? What's the date?
September 19th.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go, guys. You can get in early. Help one of ours succeed, right? I think those books are probably harder to write because you actually do have to put your like researcher hat on and figure out, instead of just storytelling your side of the story, you have to go fill in all the whys, which can be daunting.
Yes, and I personally preferred that after going the super vulnerable route of borderline exploiting my own experiences. Right. I'm a journalist, so like applying that to the story, that really worked for me. I preferred that, and I have tons of research and quotes and statistics that I couldn't even use in the book because it has to be like a short, quippy book. People don't want to read a
700 page.
Book. No one wants to read that. So
I think also in today's world, we're also just dying for the actual information. Like, not necessarily. I mean, we want story still, but I think that's why I think Annie Grace's book stands the test of time, and Quit Like a Woman stands the test of time, and Downset's book stands the test of time because it's rooted in here's the why of all of it. And I think that
exactly. And that was another part of the conversation. I was just like, do we need another white woman's rock bottom getting sober story?
Yeah, like high bottom.
And maybe maybe
right.
I don't know, but like I don't think that is my most valuable self.
Right.
Is that Today, maybe one day I will write a memoir, but today that's not what came out. You know, what I really wanted was like a Quit Like a Woman or a Sober Curious, where it really is examining the culture, and it's talking about the societal norms of alcohol use, but really, you know, laser focusing on how that intersects with relationships, sex, sexuality, gender identity, all of this. And that hasn't been done yet. So I'm really excited that that's the book that I wrote.
Yeah, me too. I didn't know this switch happened. I'm glad you set me right on my ways. Because I remember when you asked me for my like byline, that felt like forever ago.
Remember? It was forever ago.
Yeah.
You know, it's so funny, like without getting too inside baseball on the publishing world, like the book comes out in September, 23, but I turned it in September of 22. Like this book is like, by the time it comes out, I wrote it. I can say
it's old news to you.
Exactly. So it's kind of weird. Especially like as a freelance writer, I'm so used to writing things and they get published a week or two later. This is not like that. Not at all.
Yeah. I mean, like what's life like for you now, because you're in kind of that weird space between like I finished my homework but the teacher hasn't graded it yet.
I know that's exactly how it feels. You know, like our podcast Recovery Rocks is going strong. Because I am a type A Capricorn, I am working on a second book proposal. I do have an idea for a second book.
Okay.
Now that I know how long the publishing,
are books like tattoos where you can't stop once you get one?
I think so. Like I've applied my addictive personality to writing books, I think.
Well, that's healthy at least.
It's
more constructive.
It's definitely more constructive and maybe more helpful. But yeah, I mean, and also just like I said, we moved and I'm really enjoying setting up our home, having an office, reading books, watching movies, like just being a human and not like when I was on deadline for that book, it was my whole world. It was my whole life. I couldn't do anything else. So I feel like I'm getting my life back.
What's the best piece of advice for somebody that wants to write a book?
Let yourself write bad. That advice was given to me by Ruth Dannon in a writing course that I took in 2015. That advice alone, whether you're a writer, you're a painter, sculptor, whatever you do that's creative, you just have to let yourself be bad at it for a little while. I got so caught up in editing in my head before I even got words onto the page. And when Ruth said those words, let yourself write bad, it just, all the doors just flew open and it changed my life. It really did. I don't think this book would exist if she didn't share that advice with me. So that's the number one piece of advice.
It's good advice.
You can't edit a blank page, like you got to clean, like clean the pipes, get the really shitty words out. Like you see these, anytime there's a movie or a TV show about a writer, like in the 60s or I don't know, in the 20s, 30s, whatever, back in typewriter era, they're typing and then they rip the paper out of the typewriter and crumble it and throw it behind them. They're writing bad. They're getting like, they're like, okay, that was terrible, next. And then they start over. So just do it. Nike.
And it makes me think of that Little Women scene, the Greta Gerwig Little Women, which is I think one of my favorite movies. But then she stops writing because she gets like negative feedback, and then she loses a family member. I won't spoil it for any of us that don't know what happens in Little Women, but she loses a family member, and then she starts writing again, and yeah, I mean, she's like on fire. And it was like pen and quill time. So she like has all these papers laid out for her and she's throwing them away and she's reordering them. And yeah, I mean, what a daunting process.
I mean, you have to like, you can also think of it as just like playing, like being creative, like is like also connecting with your inner child. And I don't know what happened in our lives when like we were children and encouraged to be silly and creative And then I don't know what, you probably know this more than I do, but like what happens when all of a sudden we're supposed to like grow up, and having these dreams of being an artist is considered silly. You have to get a full-time job, and like,
well, I think part of it, I mean, don't you think it's capitalism, right? Like, I mean,
yeah, that's probably capitalism.
Yeah. It's like we all had bills to pay and, you know, health insurance to obtain. And so then, you know, that gets in the way of harsh is the flow for sure. For me anyway. Creativity is still something I have trouble accessing because I feel like you need to monetize it, or you need to, I don't know, publicize it in a way. I'm kind of in my vulnerable girl era, or like a privacy era, where I'm not really into sharing everything all the time, making content all the time. And I feel like that's just commodified, that like, oh, if I made a good dinner, I have to like make a video about it.
Everybody needs to see this dinner that you made.
But we don't enjoy it for ourselves.
I mean, but that's also like, that's what artists have always done, is they've turned a personal experience into art and shared it, you know, and like, and that's, we're still in that now, but it's commodified and it's super Instagrammable. And, you know, I share that just because it's like, it's so easy to just like knock social media and make fun of it and say that we're all on our phones too much. Yeah, of course we are. But it's also like, look at how many people are being creative now. And like I think that's, you know, like that's worth applauding, I think.
Yeah, and that's very hard work in and of itself. I think the thing that for me, where it lost its luster, is when you attach like a monetary value to things. And then also, you know, in order to like please the algorithms, you need to have engagement. And so then it's like this external validation point. But yeah, I mean, I think the fact that like real. Why I love TikTok is like, you know, last night I went down a rabbit hole of a man making miniatures, and that's just what he does, is he makes miniature like dioramas and puts it on TikTok. And, you know, but he's still creating, and it's not necessarily for the views. I'm sure on some level it is, but it just felt it's like the return of the regular creative person, thank God. And like Substacks and like all of that's so exciting again. It's like the return of the blog.
Return of the Mac.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm excited. I've been really trying to access my creativity in my own life. And I'm like, is that writing? Is that, you know, painting? What is that for myself? Because it's really hard to think about. I think all the things I've ever done have been for other people. So what does that look like for me? I know.
That's real. And, you know, so it's like, you didn't ask a second piece of advice that I would give for anyone who wants to tap into their creativity is take a class. So take a pottery class, take a writing class, and anything like that. Like, it's something that'll hold you accountable, whether it's a one-time work class, a four-time like a workshop where you meet once a week for a month, whatever that is. That'll definitely, it'll spark some creativity, and it'll give you accountability and deadlines, which I definitely need. Yeah, I need too. That.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, we are off the beaten path of sobriety a bit, kind of. But tell me,
it's all connected.
Tell me what your sobriety looks like today, because we're in, I don't know what to call it. I was calling it like baby, toddler, child sobriety, but I'm I'm coming up on 7 years, and I know you are either 7 or coming up on 8. What does it look like now?
Yeah, 7 years now. Okay, mine was November 30th, 2015. So yeah, we're right around the same time. Yeah, my recovery, it looks different now. I now work with a cannabis doctor, and I've learned to implement cannabis into my recovery.
And that's new?
And that's new.
Newish,
yeah. That's been, what?
I said newish, new. I don't know. When did you start like implementing that?
Yeah. It's been about a year, but I just started talking about it because I wanted, you know, as you know, it's very stigmatized in general, but especially in the recovery community. And I was just about a year ago, I was going through some really heavy shit, and I talked to my doctor about it, talked to my therapist about it. I did not want to up my Lexapro.
Okay.
I take 20 milligrams of Lexapro every day. I didn't want to up my Lexapro, and my anxiety is, my therapist calls situational, and and I would have benefited. I would benefit from Xanax. I know that I would benefit from a Xanax prescription. But that Xanax was definitely a substance that I abused in the past, and very, very addictive. And I didn't want to go there.
Nor
so
did
we
you want to be
explored some other
constipated
options
all the time.
That's one of the many things that I did not want to be all the time. So that was not an option for me. I was not comfortable getting back into anything like that. So, cannabis is legal in New York. So I explored that route. I now have a cannabis doctor, and
Sounds
so
bougie.
she's incredible. And we work together on learning about strains that actually complement Lexapro. So that's really interesting.
I love that. I need a weed consultation.
I mean, it's so fascinating. And now, applying all my journalistic nerdy research, I'm learning all about cannabis and the endocannabinoid system and how our bodies are literally wired to receive the medicine from this plant. And so, what I'm doing is, it's called microdosing. And, I'm taking 2 to 4 milligrams as needed. So it's not every day. There are some days when I need a couple doses. There are some days that I don't need any doses. And I take it in a little gummy form.
Okay. Edibles.
And in edibles, like I don't want to smoke it, at least today, like, because I used to, and I used to love smoking weed and getting really, really stoned. And so that felt too familiar for me. So having it in either a pill form or an edible felt more medicinal. So that's what works for me today. And, it's, my co-host Lisa and we talk a lot about sobriety toolkits on our podcast, and cannabis is now a big part of my sobriety toolkit, and it works in concert with therapy and Al-Anon meetings and yoga and the gym and all of these things. So that's
Do you feel
what
like
it looks
on
like
some
today.
level you have to justify that to our community? Because I get that.
Oh, it's not on some level. It is on all levels. I feel like I need to justify that.
Why do you feel like that? I feel like my camera has schmutz on. Okay, there we go.
I feel like I need to justify cannabis in recovery because it is so stigmatized already, just in society. Like cannabis is just thought of as like this lazy stoner, like, archetype, which I'm not. As we've just talked about, I'm quite the opposite of that. And so, I love how the legalization of this plant is bringing some really interesting.
I'm laughing because you're like, this plant, this medicine.
It's what it is.
No, I know, but it's like, I think that we have to do that sometimes, right? Because the addiction part of us can make like sugar bad or caffeine bad or any of the what I consider baddies, like sort of weaponized for ourselves. And I think in recovery we have to be like extra aware of what those things can be, because even for me it's like, I mean, staying up too late can be a drug for me. And I know that sounds like eye roll, very
no, I get it. Instagram, like I can't even have the app on my phone. Like I will get lost at Instagram. I download it when I need to make a post and then I delete it because like it's a dangerous drug for me.
Right.
I need those dopamine hits, and I can just keep scrolling. So anything can be addictive, like.
But
food,
I think
sugar, sex,
in addiction,
gambling,
and with my recovery from alcohol, like there are things that have been like hyper addictive for me, like cigarettes, and then there have been things that are not hyper addictive for me, like my anxiety medication. Like I don't take Xanax either, but I do take medication for anxiety and depression that could become addictive, and for me it's never felt like a trigger. And same with cannabis, it's never been an issue that I've been concerned about for myself, but there are other things. Like, I know sugar is definitely a trigger for me. I know cigarettes are definitely a trigger for me. I know that, like you said, Xanax, those things would just be a little bit more scary for me to navigate. So I think that's interesting in sobriety, because I know for me, like, I can never have alcohol. Like, that leads to dark places.
Yeah.
But the other thing that it makes me think of is, in my internship, I'm at a medication assisted facility, which means I work with opioid users who utilize methadone and Suboxone to manage their addiction. And the thing that makes me annoyed for them is that they can't go in traditional AA circles either, because AA recognizes methadone and Suboxone as a mind-altering substance.
I know.
And so they feel alienated from those communities, even though they would greatly benefit from them. And I kind of feel like it's not the same conversation, but it's similar, right? Like, you're utilizing cannabis as a tool in a monitored way and being sort of ostracized by the recovery community. Because
I mean, to be completely honest, if I'm not an AA person, but like, if I was an AA person, I wouldn't even feel comfortable talking about being on Lexapro in meetings.
Right.
So let alone microdosing cannabis under doctor supervision, like that. Is
AA Scientology? I don't know. We don't know.
That's our next episode,
right? Because it's like very rigid. So yeah,
it is. It's very rigid, and it's the irony is Bill W. did a lot of psychedelics, and there's a lot of work. There's a lot of interesting information out there about Bill W. is the founder of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and he talked in the past, in the 30s and 40s, about how psychedelics can help with addiction, and it's so funny how these the AA community they're so staunch against anything. It's like, it's full on abstinence or get out of here, but you can totally smoke cigarettes and like mainline coffee. That's totally okay. Yeah. But
anything else,
if you use mouthwash, then you can't sit with us.
Right.
Anything with the tiniest bit of alcohol in it. So that's very extreme. That's one of the many reasons why AA is not my jam, but I'm grateful that AA is around, because it's a free resource literally all over the world.
It definitely works. It works when you need it, and like in the way that it can. And I tell like my clients also, I'm like, well, go check it out. Like, you don't have to like, take what you want and leave the rest, man. It's a supportive community where people aren't using. So, but yeah, I think that we are a rush to sort of make excuses then for other tools in our toolbox that could be like controversial, because I mean, I do eye roll at the people that are like the mushroom microdosers and how it's changed their lives. And like, I feel like sometimes those things can be a substitute for therapy and for support groups. And maybe that's also just my bias because I'm going into that field. Where I'm like, and I mean, you solved all your problems on a fucking ayahuasca trip, like eye roll,
Well, and that the amount of work that it takes to, I don't want to say do it the right way, because if ayahuasca works for you, then that's amazing.
Right.
But you're not with a mental health professional, most likely, when you're doing it. So I do think ketamine therapy is interesting. I've not done it, but I do like the idea of people that are doing mushrooms and ketamine under medical supervision. The whole trip is guided in a safe space with a mental health professional. And I think that could be really valuable. And it's becoming legalized in a lot of states, and it's becoming more common, but it's still very new. There's not enough research on it yet.
Right.
But I think it's interesting.
I think I might have I feel like I use cannabis in the same way that you utilize cannabis. It feels a little less supervised, but I also think that I can have baddie thoughts about cannabis, but I'm not addicted to it. And I manage that by, I don't want to say like limiting my access to it, but in the same way that I think about cigarettes, like cigarettes can take over my entire brain, where like cannabis doesn't to me, but I still kind of label it as a baddie thing in my head, which maybe that's what I need to work on.
Well, I think what you touched on something so important is that everything is so personal for each person.
Totally.
Where I can smoke one cigarette a year and be totally fine.
Right.
You know, like
my God bless you.
I'll crave one cigarette a year and I'll maybe have like 2 puffs and I'm like, okay, that's it. But see, it's totally different for me.
Yeah.
And then some people, the idea of implementing cannabis into their recovery, that could lead them into a very dark place.
True.
But for me, it works.
Right.
So I am not endorsing it by all means. I am just, my goal ever since I started that blog in 2015 has been to destigmatize mental health and addiction recovery. And here I am at 7 years sober, and this is where my recovery is today. And if you have a problem with it, whatever, but this is where I am.
Yeah. No one's forcing you to listen. I maintain that to the end.
They're probably not listening anymore.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about love, because you're kind of like my resident love guru. So now we know where you're at. You're using cannabinoids in small doses to manage anxiety and aid in your recovery. I think that's great. Good for you. I don't like the label set Cali sober. I think that's annoying. So we won't go there.
I don't think I'm California. So I think California sober is like recreational, like people that are using it recreationally, I think.
Yeah. Maybe that's
and I don't do that.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, it's the term California sober is so trendy and buzzwordy, and it's like, it's nothing new. There's people that have used cannabis in their recovery for a very long time. And now it just has a term. So whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we won't go there. That's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah, that is.
I don't know. You people partnered, people unpartnered. Tell us
self-partnered.
What
as Selena
what
Gomez
do we know?
says.
What do we need to know?
I mean, I think, as corny as this sounds, the most relationship that you're ever going to be in is the relationship with yourself. And the first chapter of my book is literally called Dating Yourself. And it is about how to be alone in recovery, or whether you're, in recovery, sober, curious, doing a dry month, whatever, how to find solitude and feel comfortable with yourself without alcohol. That is the most important part to, before sober dating, before sober sex, before sober relationships, before any of that, you have to fall in love with yourself without alcohol. And that's really fucking hard. It's really, really hard to do. That's why we drank. Yeah. It's because we didn't like to be avoiding ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think also like low self-esteem and low self-worth is like the crux of, it's the birth of addiction for many. Like, yes, there's trauma associated with that, but I think like somewhere along the lines where the people pleasers, the codependents, the people with that are seeking external validation, that's like the birthplace of why we're trying to manage feelings, escaping them, dealing with them with substances in the first place, is because we don't, on some level, respect ourselves or love ourselves enough.
I think that people don't realize that until they themselves get sober, or someone very close to them gets sober. Because I always thought getting sober meant just not drinking. I didn't know that meant that a really big part of it is figuring out why you drank in the first place. And that's really hard. That is really, really difficult to finally look in that mirror that you've been ignoring for who knows how long. That was really hard for me. So finding ways to date yourself, whether that means, earlier we talked about taking classes, being really creative. That is, I think,
getting comfortable being alone. Going to a restaurant, eating alone. I feel like that's a trigger for a lot of people. Going to the movies by yourself.
It's hard. Go to the movies alone. Go out to eat alone. Go for a walk alone. Just go do things alone and
be alone.
Just be alone. I think that's really hard for some people, but in early sobriety, you need hobbies And so that's why I definitely recommend taking classes or, peer support groups, anything like that. You need to be around community. But the reason that I'm a bigger advocate for it's like leaning into creativity is because you're meeting like-minded people, and whether they're sober or not, it doesn't matter. You're meeting like-minded people and you have writing in common, or you have pottery in common, whatever you're doing. That's how you're going to build organic friendships and relationships with yourself and with other people, is because you're cultivating that part of yourself. Mm-hmm. And that in turn will make you more confident without alcohol. It's going to make you a hell of a lot more interesting on a date if you can talk about the pottery that you just made. And you're not going to feel like you need that drink, because you're already feeling a little bit more confident because you're tapping into your creativity.
Yeah, that's very powerful advice. And I think, even for me lately, like, I felt like I got burned out of self-help books and recovery books. And mm-hmm. like, if you're in it for too long, you can, I don't know, it feels overwhelming. And even like my book club with my in real life friends, like, I didn't really like reading the books that they were reading. And I felt like they were smarter than me at reading. So I was like, our book club is now like snack club, where we don't really read books. We talk about like TV shows. It's just like regular friend hangout. But there was a part of me that like sort of avoided reading for pleasure, because I didn't really like it was attached to a book club, or it was attached to fixing myself. And like I was telling you before we started recording, like I recently, like I will always love true crime. And I feel like there's a connection to like those of us with addictive personalities and things like true crime, which I will get into on a whole other episode. But I was like, I need to start rereading true crime again. And that is like, Reddit is my place where I find my like-minded people, and I want to find them maybe more in real life. But it's something that, like, again, I'm not working on myself. It's like true pleasure when I'm doing that. And I think that has been something that I never did before, because again, I was like joining the book club to read the books that they wanted to read because I was lonely and wanted to be in community. Yes, that's one avenue to explore, but I think now that as I can like deconstruct that a little bit further, am I really enjoying this, or do I just like the connection of being around these people in this club? Can I just turn them into friends and not a club, Yes.
Well, and like it's interesting because there's a lot of parallels that we could draw from what you just said, of like the people pleasing, trying to be this version of yourself that you think other people want from you.
Yeah.
And while doing that in the form of a book club is definitely a lot healthier than doing that with alcohol, but it's very similar. I mean, a lot of people, including you and I, drank because that was our community. That's what we have in common with our friends.
Yes.
So when you remove that is why you need to have healthy community. That is why you need to have your creativity, whatever that is. Even if you're not don't worry about writing a book or becoming a professional artist. Creativity is really essential just for you to feel confident and feel full as a person, because we need to be in touch with our creative sides. It brings out this, the thesis of my book is replacing liquid courage with intrinsic courage, tapping into your intrinsic courage. And I think that's what creativity does. It replaced that liquid courage, and it really helped me cultivate my intrinsic courage, which helped me show up more authentically on dates. It helped me feel more empowered in the bedroom. It helps me communicate. I know what I want with my partner. I know how to communicate what I want with my partner, because I know I have a better idea of who I am. Because I'm not drinking and I am tapped into that artistic creative side.
What I do like to do. Yeah. Have you noticed any trends, like post-pandemic relationship trends, or like, I feel like no one is having sex if you're in a relationship, or even if maybe you're not, like I feel like the people that I've been open with in that conversation is that like the pandemic essentially created no separation in anyone's lives. And so now we've just been existing with the same people all the time in like the same fucking building. And I don't know if everybody's just dead inside, but what have you noticed? Because I'm sure you have a much more educated perspective than like me asking 10 people I know.
Well, you're absolutely correct. I mean, people are having less sex.
Is intimacy dead
like
because we've been too close physically?
I think intimacy might be changing. It might look different now. My partner and I know you as well, like we schedule our intimacy time, and it's not, whether it leads to sex or not, it doesn't matter. It's just like at 9:00, we're going to hang out. Let's just see what happens. We might just like lay on the ground and listen to records, and that's great. So I think, once you get into a relationship, it really is that once you're in a relationship for longer than, a year or two, and you're really like in it, that's when you're building a life together, and sex is no longer the thing you have in common. Like hooking up, going out, having fun, partying, you're like living together and doing and arguing over the dishes and talking about the bills.
Yeah, your roommates.
And yeah, this is deeply unsexy stuff. Let's just be very real. Not to mention, like, we don't have kids, but people that have kids, that's a whole other thing. So, I think it's really getting honest with what you want out of intimacy and sexuality. We grew up reading Cosmopolitan's like 5 ways to please your man.
Yes.
So I always thought that it was my job to please a man. But, again, spending a lot of time alone in my recovery, dating myself, I figured out what I want out of intimacy, what I want out of sexuality, what I want a date to look like, as opposed to let's grab a drink and then we'll probably have sex. Because that's what it always was for me. So I share all of this to say, I think intimacy is changing, especially for people like us that are either in recovery or in therapy, doing the work, really having those uncomfortable conversations with your partner, with yourself, with your loved ones, talking about what you want intimacy to look like and not comparing to someone else. I think that's the biggest one. Like, if you're thinking you need to have sex 3 times a week, where are you getting that statistic from? No, you don't need to do that.
This is like so triggering to me, the statistics of it all. Like, who made this fucking rule up? Why is it here?
Literally Cosmo?
Why in other countries is it like once a year? Like,
I know.
Are they?
It puts.
I don't know.
It puts so much pressure on us, especially women. Like, I always felt like it was my responsibility to please men. I never stopped to think about what pleasure means to me. In just to me, pleasure always meant a blowjob or like making, making him come, like his pleasure. I never spent the time thinking about what pleasure means to me. And a big part of the research that I did for my book was I interviewed some people that are on the asexual spectrum and how they used alcohol. And that blew my mind. Talk about underrepresented communities is the asexual and aromantic community. So asexuals, people that are most likely not having sex, or aromantic is people that do not have romantic feelings. Asexual don't necessarily have sexual feelings. There's a lot of nuance there, but I'm just skimming the top here. But I interviewed some asexual people. Do you have a quiz
to see if you are either of those things in your book?
I should.
Maybe you can offer a companion worksheet, like, so you know which group you fall into. Because like even my friends on Reddit, they're like high libido, low libido. Like, where are we? What are we doing? I don't know.
Well, and that's exactly it. Is like I don't have a quiz, but I do have recommended reading a book called Ace by Angela Chen. She is an asexual author. And so I read the book wanting to learn more about the ace community, just from a curiosity perspective, but I ended up learning a lot about my own sexuality and learning that sexuality does exist I knew it existed on a spectrum, but I never thought much about asexuality and aromanticism, and how that shows up for me. But how this has to do with sobriety is all of the asexual people that I interviewed talked about, using alcohol to try to make themselves feel normal, try to make themselves like sex. And that just really hit home for me. And I felt like that was such a universal message. And then once they got sober, they realized that they're like, wait, actually, like, I don't even like sex. I don't even like that was a performance. I was just trying to be normal. And then they find these healthy relationships. And for them, that means a relationship with little to no sex. And that is healthy. And I think, that is sexual liberation. We think sexual liberation is like going to an orgy.
Burning Man.
And sure,
that's what I think of.
It can be.
Yeah.
It absolutely can be having an orgy at Burning Man while on mushrooms. Sure. But it can also mean coming to terms with the fact that you really don't like sex that much. Maybe you really don't like masturbating, and that's okay.
Whoa. I can't wait to read this book. I don't know where I'm at on the spectrum. It depends on the day. I've been having a conversation with a lot of my people my age, where I'm going to be 36, and your hormones change, and with everything else, like I feel like that has a lot to do with it as well. And so yeah, the sex conversation, it will always be difficult, I think, to understand. But I think I love the idea of the dating yourself and figuring out what you want, and giving yourself that space, hopefully in sobriety and hopefully early sobriety, to figure that out, because along with like your sexual desires, you'll just get to know like a lot about what you like and what you don't like without the extra noise. And as people with issues with substances, I think we are by nature people pleasers. So giving ourselves the space to please ourselves is needed.
And I think that alone time is necessary whether you are single or in a relationship. And it's not just for early sobriety. Right. It's you need to continue to date yourself. Like you need to spend alone time. Like it's sorry, not sorry. Just doing things that make you happy by yourself. And I promise on some level, you'll see that ripple effect it has on your friendships, on your romantic relationships, on how you show up at work. It's just, it's crucial.
That's powerful. Okay. We've covered your sobriety. I mean, what else? Okay. So as you know, this is Seltzer Squad 2.0. I'm solo now. What do you have any advice or?
So are you dating yourself on the podcast?
I am dating myself on this podcast. That's the ultimate question. Yep. I am dating myself on this podcast. We're still figuring out what we want, and what we like. It's hard for me to sort of, like, again, goes back to exactly what we're talking about, is place my value outside and like troll online for what I think other people want. And on some level, yes, I want to listen to be able to provide things and be of service. But on another level, if you're just getting unsolicited opinions, then, that just makes you feel shitty. And when you're particularly vulnerable when you are alone, because if you're with other people, then they can, hit you on the back and say, don't worry about it. And vice versa. I feel like Jess and I had that great relationship where if she was really like lit up about some troll, then I could be like, dude, fuck them. We're just getting more engagement. Like, let them troll us. Yeah. And we could calm each other down. But now it's just me. So, where I'm just asking my guests, like, where do you think I should take the podcast?
I think that I'm one of those weird writers who loves marketing and branding. So I'm going to say, like, let's rebrand.
Oh, okay. We need a new identity. Okay.
I think so. I mean, it's
like, I recorded a solo episode and I was even like, do I say we? Like, do I say I? It feels much more comfortable for me I'm like, I do still have my editor. I don't know. It was like a whole thing that I was like wrapping around in my head. And it's hard to say just me.
Kate, I think the rebrand will help you with all of that. Yeah. I think coming up with, I don't even know if it's a new name, a new logo, whatever it is, I think that will help personify what this is. And that doesn't need to happen today or tomorrow, but, something to think about, because, and there's enough BFF podcasts. There's enough sober BFF podcasts out there. I'm one of them. Recovery Rocks. Check it out. We just want a Webby. Anyway,
you want a Webby for being BFFs, didn't you? What was it for?
Yeah, literally. No, it's Best Buddy podcast.
There you go.
Yeah. So,
Snaps.
But you bring something so valuable with your education and your work experience. There's not enough of that. So like, I think lean into that.
Okay. Yeah, I like that.
I mean,
you know, I've said it before and I'll say it again, squad. I like answering your questions. I think that's my sort of my niche that I've always like ever since I was little wanted to be like who was that bitch in the paper that our moms used to read? It was Dear somebody.
Dear Abby?
Yes.
That bitch in the paper.
Sorry, Abby. I like forever have always wanted to be like Dear Sugar, Dear Abby, whatever, Dear Kate. Yeah. Who cares? I love like people sending in their questions and breaking it down. So that's my favorite thing. But I love interviewing people, and I am inquisitive by nature. So
I think you could do both.
Those are my safe areas, I guess.
You could start the episode with answering a listener question and then go into an interview, or maybe you and the guest can answer the listener question and then go into the interview. Like there's so much you can play around with, and you have so much to offer. Like your brain is so gorgeous and rich with information, and I think lean into that.
Yeah, we'll see. I think right now we're in our finding ourselves era. Who is she? What does she like?
She's dating herself.
Yeah, she's dating herself. So yeah, I mean, this was helpful. Thank you for being so kind. And I'm so proud of you. We were just talking before this, like Tawny and I met in 2015. She lived in Jersey City. We met at a coffee shop. She had blue hair. You were already sober. Was I not? I think that's how the story goes.
I mean,
I don't think I was. I think I was in my shame spiral of like, I have a problem. I got sober after that.
Who knows? But I feel it's funny because I feel like we've only hung out IRL like twice.
Maybe. Yeah.
But we text about conspiracy theories a lot.
Yes. And then like we'll have the occasional like hour-long phone call where you'll be like, I need advice on this, or I'm like, what else should I do about that? And then you'll just give me super sound advice, then we won't speak for a year.
I mean, that's the modern millennial friendship, I think.
I guess, yeah.
At least for us.
And I feel like we're both comfortable with it. So, guys, find yourself some friends like this in sobriety where it's very low effort but meaningful.
It's
low effort, high impact.
Like, it's one of those like, I know I could call you and like we could just talk about something, and then we won't talk for a year, but it's like there's no hard feelings. It's just it's just life stuff.
Yep. Well, okay. Tell us where we can find you on all the things. Tell us where we can buy the book.
Yeah, so I am on all of the social medias at Tawny Lara. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, all of that. My book is called DRY Humping, a guide to dating, relating, and hooking up without the booze. And it comes out in September, but you can pre-order it now. If you follow me, you'll see we're doing some pre-order incentives. So, if you pre-order and email me a screenshot of your receipt, we have some exciting stuff to thank you with.
Are you going to do any events like in the area of us?
Yeah. For around book launch time, there's going to be, I'm going to definitely do some events. I'll probably have an official book launch party, all of the things.
I love that.
So stay tuned. I mean, it's like, I know it feels really far away, and it is, but I think it'll be here. It'll be here soon.
It's only like 7.5 months away.
And our podcast is called Recovery Rocks. Lisa and I talk about recovery and rock and roll. We talk about, like Kate and I just talked about, just sobriety life. And then each episode ends with us talking about a song or two that has to do with what we just talked about. And Lisa she's a Gen X 12-stepper, and I'm a millennial yogi blogger, writer, weirdo. So we come at it from very different perspectives, but I think it shows that there's no one path to recovery.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I can't wait to come to your book party and read the book. Until we meet again, be nice to yourself. And don't forget, hangover suck.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Every review helps other listeners find us. Music by Dead Go West. Art by Kate Sander. For show notes and resources, check out seltzersquad.com.